Thank you all for coming out. Thank you very, very much for coming out for a number of reasons. First of all is for our friends in Gaza, who at this point, because of the siege, are pretty well isolated from the world. Nobody gets into Gaza, nobody gets out. And so they feel pretty well cut off. So this is going to go on YouTube, and they will know that all of you were here and that this is something that we are sharing with them. And secondly, the reason I'm very grateful to you for being here is that so little gets out about Gaza, so little actually gets in the news about Gaza, that I really appreciate your coming here to hear at least my latest perspectives on what's going on in Gaza. This is a very interesting time, actually, because 17 years ago, in this very room, Peter Gerard and I started the International Trauma Treatment Program. Yeah. And started is exactly what we did. We just started and had no idea what we were going to do. We knew that we needed to get people over here because it was getting too difficult to work with practitioners overseas in war zones because we kept getting caught up in the war. And we would start workshops and then have to stop and leave and go someplace else because we were being bombed or mortar fire or something like that. And we thought, well, why don't we bring them here? Which was a great idea with absolutely no execution planned whatsoever. And so we were very much a work in progress and really began to understand that that was the point, that we always wanted to be a work in progress. We never wanted to settle into some sort of institutional, preserved, permanent way of doing things, because in so doing that, we would then begin to enforce our own ideas of what needed to be on the very people we were working with, and essentially upon whom we were dependent to know what needed to be done. So the whole philosophy of ITTP has always been, we don't know what we're going to do until we are there doing it. And one of the things that's happened to us now, years and years later, is that we really are not able to perform our mission the way we used to. The problem we're running into is that it's getting very difficult for us to go into the countries where we want to work. For example, since 2002, I have consistently applied for permits to go into Gaza and have been consistently refused, could not get in. A couple times I was able to get in through Egypt. That was a wonderful experience, but even that has now essentially been closed off. The other thing is that in bringing people here, we have now been stymied. Getting visas to bring practitioners from war zones to Olympia, which is what we used to do, are almost impossible to obtain. And one of the reasons for that is Section 214B of the Immigration Naturalization Service Code, which tries to take any aspect of prejudice or favoritism out of the visa process and make it solely quantitative. So in order to get a visa from these areas, you have to either be old, like me, because if you're old, you're probably going to go back to your home country because that's where, that's what you're familiar with. And the older we get, the more we just cling to familiarity. So of course, yeah, we'll be going back there. Or wealthy, yeah, got a lot of money, you'll probably not leave it in the home country. You'll go back and enjoy it there. So either you're old or you're wealthy, or you have a family. And if you have a family, then you're probably going to go back to your home country, and you aren't likely to blow your visa and stay in the United States. Now the problem is that the people we brought over here were universally young, single, and poor. If you're in a war zone, you don't have any money. If you had any money, you wouldn't be in the war zone. You'd be out of there. If you were old, you wouldn't be in the war zone, or you wouldn't be even practicing. You wouldn't be doing the kind of work we do. It's the young people that are doing the kind of work we're doing. And then finally, if you have a family, you're not going to leave them in a war zone. The third person we brought over here was from Zimbabwe, and he was here for a 6-month term with us, and after 4, he had to go back because his family was under threat, and Robert Mugabe had put the word out that this family had to go. So he had to go back to Zimbabwe, grab his family, and flee to Botswana. So the people we bring over are usually young, poor, and single, and they don't qualify for visas. So we've been pretty well brought to a halt on the work we do. So the board of directors, and there are several of them here right now. Daniel is one. Liz is one. Is Marissa here? Marissa, are you still here? She had to go to something else. Did someone sneak in here from the board that I didn't see? Okay, good. We also have Ed Brendler. We have Craig Papello and Marilyn Piper, and they are now in Mexico on their usual holiday, and we had to schedule this during that time, so that's too bad. And Marissa Rathbone, we have Allison Helberg. Have I forgotten anybody? Is that it? Okay. So at any rate, they brainstormed and came up with an idea, and we all worked together on this, and the idea was, let's go to the places where we have worked before as tourists and take a video camera with us and collect the stories of the people we've worked with. Let's give them a chance to tell their story independently of the world media, which either is not interested or is going to distort it. Let's let them just tell their story. So that's what we did in Gaza in this past November. And I want to thank a number of people here. I want to thank Dennis Mills for doing all of the filming and the editing of the videos that we shot in Gaza. I want to thank Daniel for being the person who's our tech support here, and that was quite a crisis today when I realized my computer does not interface with the equipment here, and Daniel got it all together, so you will now have pictures. So thank you very much. I want to thank, of course, Traditions, because this is where it all started, and this is where it's continued, and the fact that Traditions has not been blown off the map at this point, I don't know why, because the stuff that goes on here, not good for the establishment. Okay, so Brad Grimstead, who is a former board of directors, also helped tremendously with this presentation tonight. So what I did when I went to Gaza this time was teamed up with a group from Seattle and around the rest of the country that's called Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. Jerry Haynes is the one who heads that up. Absolutely fabulous woman. I mean, Jerry is just, she's a saint. She's a real saint. And she forms personal relationships with the people in Israel who issue permits. And she calls them 2 or 3 times a day from the time we apply until the time we get a permit. And we applied for our permit in July, and we wanted to leave on October 24th, and on October 20th we got the permit. And so there we were, 9 of us. We had a general surgeon, 2 neurosurgeons, a general practitioner, a body work person, another body work person. There were 9 of us all together, a cardiologist, Jerry, who's the nurse, and so here we go, and we arrive at the Erez crossing with 30 enormous suitcases full of medications that you can't get across the border unless you sneak them in. So here we were with these 30 things, and we get to the border, and the border is closed, of course. Sorry, can't go in. And we're all like, okay, here we go. We're prepared for this. It's happened before. We're, okay, we'll go back to some hotel somewhere. But meanwhile, the bus that drove us down has left. We'll have to figure that all out. And Jerry gets on her cell phone and calls the woman who's in charge of giving permits at Erez and says, "Hi, we're here, and how are you?" And the woman calls the border and says, "Let him in." Now, right off the bat, this is the take-home lesson from everything I'm going to be telling you tonight. And it's kind of on the same level as Marshall Rosenberg's Compassionate Listening, if any of you are familiar with that, in which he divides us all into 2 groups. Giraffes, because as he said, giraffes have the largest hearts of any mammals, because of course they got that long neck and they got to get the blood up to the brain type thing. They have very big hearts. And the other group are called jackals. And jackals basically feed off everybody else. And what we're going to find is, no matter where we go in the world, we are with jackals and we are with giraffes. And one of the really wonderful things that I experienced this time going in through Israel was encountering the giraffes and encountering those people with really big hearts. And the most significant one to me, the most memorable, was when I was leaving and I got to the airport at about 11 o'clock at night, and in order to get into the airport, you have to go through security. Of course, in order to get out of Gaza, you've got to go through an enormous amount of security. And I walk up, and there's a very young woman there who's a soldier, and she's in charge of letting people in or not the airport. And she says, well, where have you been in Israel? And I said, I haven't been in Israel. I've been in Gaza. And she goes, oh, they're going to want to know about that inside. So be sure you tell them that, because they're going to want to know, they want to look through your luggage. I said, okay. And she said, are you a doctor? And I said, yes, I'm a doctor. And she goes, well, thank you for doing the work in Gaza. I feel really bad for those people, and I wish there was something I could do for them. These are the people we support. These are the people in whatever country they exist, we support. So when someone says to me, do you support Israel? My first question is, who? Which Israel are you talking about? Are you talking about the jackals? No, I do not support the jackals, and I never will. Are you talking about the giraffes? Yes, absolutely, and I will do whatever I can for them. So the bottom line in all of this is that we have to make that distinction ourselves, and increasingly make that distinction whenever we are asked about what we're supporting and what we're doing. One of the wonderful things about Gaza is it's a great place to visit. It's really lovely. From the moment I get there until the moment I leave, I'm with friends. I first went there in 1991 to work with the Gaza Community Mental Health Program with a physician, psychiatrist named Dr. Eenwyk El-Siraj, who many of you have met and many of you know, who died just about a year ago. And Eenwyk and I worked side by side, and also I worked with the other members of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, and we became friends. We became friends and colleagues, and we would play together, and we would laugh together, and we would eat together, and we would work together, and none of us really knew how to deal with the conditions in Gaza that we were facing. Because at that time, there was a new diagnosis just beginning to come out in the psychiatric lexicon called post-traumatic stress disorder. And there were all kinds of ideas on how you treated it. The problem being in Gaza was we never got to the post stage. It was never over. There was just trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. And one of the things in psychology that we have to be very careful of is removing people's defenses, however disordered or bizarre they may be, before the trauma is over, because they need those defenses in order to survive. So our job was a very precarious kind of helping people to maintain the defenses, whatever they were, and some of them were just rampant delusions, which we would then more or less try to support, and yet try to move them slowly into an area of greater health. This last time, when I went into Gaza, I stayed at the home of a man named Mohammed Abashala. And Dr. Abashala is he's the chairman of the board of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. I met him in Egypt a couple of years ago when we got together to discuss what we were going to do with the mental health program in Gaza after the death of Dr. El-Siraj. And Mohammed and I were two of the longest in the tooth people in the group. And so we kind of just gravitated to each other and got very good friends. And so when I arrived in Gaza, there's Mohammed, and he is welcoming Jerry's group and all of these physicians for social responsibility. He comes up to me, he says, John, he says, so glad to see you. I really wish I could entertain you this afternoon, but I have to go to work. Well, he's a vascular surgeon. And so I decided, well, I'll rib him a little bit. I said, Mohammed, you're 64. You're too old. Your hands are too shaky. You shouldn't be doing surgery. And he says to me, you want to watch? Well, there's a reason I didn't go to medical school. And that's because when I was 10 years old, I had a very serious operation that went on for 10 days, and I decided I was never going to have anything to do with that part of life again. The body, as far as I was concerned, was horribly disgusting. And so I was never going to be involved with projectile vomiting, diarrhea, suppurating wounds, any of this kind of stuff. And so I did not do that. I thought, well, if I'm going to watch a surgery, I'm either going to faint, or I'm going to throw up, or it's going to be fascinating. So I go in, and I'm all dolled up in all the stuff you have to wear, and I'm standing next to Mohammed, and in he goes. It's fascinating. I really, really thought it was just interesting. I could talk to you about that, but that's not what this is about, so we won't do that tonight. And so afterwards I said to Mohammed, that was great. I really enjoyed that. He said, Sunday we're doing an open heart surgery. Would you like to go? I was like, yeah, can I film it? Because I'm here to do videos, and I figured I really should be doing it. He said, well, I'll ask the surgeon. So he asked the surgeon. The surgeon says yes. So 4.5 hour open heart surgery. You've got about an hour of video, which Dennis is editing, which I think is really quite a heroic effort. But so that's what we were doing. And one of the interesting things about that, I had no idea that in Gaza, where there is virtually nothing, open heart surgeries were being done. And they were being done with equipment that's very, very old. And the skill of the surgeons has to substitute for the lack of technology. And they are very sophisticated. They really know what they're doing. And the other things I did there was work with the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, which meant going into homes that had been destroyed, where people had been killed, coming up with new theories of what we could do, teaching, did a lot of consulting, but also a lot of kicking back and recalling what we've been through over these last several decades and where we need to go from here, which is what we're going to talk about here. So going to Gaza, and this is something that I would recommend to all of you, if you can, go there. Apply for a permit. Let your elected representatives know that you want to go there. Let them know that the money that you donate every year to Israel, and we'll get into that in just a minute, that you want something in return, which means you want to be able to go to Gaza. And in fact, the next time they go to Israel on one of those wonderful junkets where everything is paid and you stay in the greatest hotels, they should go into Gaza. Now, if you're interested in any of that, there are two articles here from the New Yorker that you may have. One is about AIPAC and the kind of tours of Israel that AIPAC gives all of our elected representatives, none of whom go into Gaza. And also another article on the fact of the matter being that the two-state solution has never been a valid solution to this problem from the jackal perspective in Israel. So anything that was ever done with regard to that was basically just a sham. But I would encourage you to go to Gaza. However, this is what you're going to face. Gaza is separated from Israel by a wall. We have the picture of the wall? Oh no, this is first my cartoon. I always put this up there for PowerPoint. This is the devil. The devil's talking to his minion, and the devil says, I need someone well-versed in the art of torture. Do you know PowerPoint? So here are my torture for you tonight, PowerPoint slides. And we'll go with the next one. This is the wall, and it goes all the way down from the border with Israel. And these are the towers, and along the top of this are drone cars, which go and shoot at anybody who gets into this no man's land here. Next one, please. And this is what it looks like. When you go into Gaza, you have to walk about almost a mile through this sort of wire type stuff, and you get to see this no man's land. Here's the wall, here's the no man's land, and no one is allowed in there. Gaza is very small. And to take this amount of land away from the very small amount of land that exists in Gaza compresses people into very, very small spaces. Next one, please. This is what it's like to walk down this corridor. And you're just walking through this area where nobody's allowed to go and you can't go out. Next one, please. And people will sneak into this area. You can see the wall here. And what they're doing is illegal. They are gathering demolished homes and buildings and factories. They're gathering cement to build new homes in Gaza after those have been destroyed. And they're not allowed to do that, but they do it and they risk being shot, and sometimes they are shot, and sometimes they are killed doing this, but it's the only source they have of any kind of building materials. So the siege that is now being imposed on Gaza is really a debilitating force. And while I was there, I had to completely ignore, as much as I could, the horror of what this does. For example, there are restrictions on travel. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out. When I was staying with Dr. Abashala, his son, who works in Greece, had been there for 2 months, unable to get out of Gaza and go back to work. The man who just wants to go to work, just wants to go back to Greece and make money for his family, but he was not allowed to do that. And of course, as you know, individuals are not allowed to go in. There are restrictions on money transfer. Any money that goes in and out of Gaza has to go through Israel. So, for example, recently, when the Palestinians applied to the International Criminal Court, the jackals in Israel decided to withhold all of the tax money that is paid on goods coming in and out of Gaza and not give it to the Palestinian Authority. So that is a stranglehold that is always available to the jackals in Israel. There's ongoing ethnic cleansing, and that's a pretty loaded term, but let's be honest about it. That's exactly what's going on. We have the next one. This is a neighborhood in Gaza after the war last summer. Everything was completely obliterated. The whole place was completely leveled. Can we have the next one? You see entire apartment blocks just completely eliminated. That's ethnic cleansing, and the reason that Israel wanted to ethnically cleanse that area was there were 10 tunnels going into Israel from Gaza that had been built by the people from Gaza. And Israel didn't know where they were. Egypt did. Egypt disclosed all the tunnels from the Egyptian side, but Israel didn't know where they were and couldn't find them, which is hard to believe, but they couldn't. So they went in and simply leveled the whole area of Gaza where they thought they originated. That's how they tried to get rid of the tunnels. That's ethnic cleansing. Home demolitions, land clearances, destruction of the infrastructure, water. They blow up the water plants. They blow up the power plant. When I was there, we had electricity 6 hours a day. And sometimes that was from like midnight until 6 in the morning. So a lot of the computer work I did, a lot of the downloading of videos, I had to do like 3 in the morning because we didn't have power. Education is compromised. All the schools are on double shifts, morning and afternoon, so the kids only get a half day of schooling. Rampant unemployment. In the 15 to 29 year age, the official number is 60%, 60% unemployment, 55% overall. 85% of Gazans depend on food aid from international organizations for their survival. The deaths of family members has been particularly debilitating. Yasser, who is the chief psychiatrist in charge of the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, lost 28 members of his family in the war last summer, none of whom obviously are terrorists, but they were just caught up in the whole fighting. However, what's very interesting about all of this is that the Gazans are slowly beginning to realize that they have won. They have won the war. And this is something I picked up this time and was able to articulate to them and talk to them about, which was Israel has thrown everything at them that it can. They've done everything they possibly can to keep this population down, and it hasn't worked. The Palestinians have not left. The Gazans are still there. They are creating vibrant communities. They have put the jackals in Israel in the position of having to resort to genocide if they're going to do anything about this, and the entire world will not allow that. Even the United States Congress might have something negative to say about that genocide. As you know, the United States Congress is unilaterally in favor of whatever the jackals do. There's an enormous resilience in Gaza. They have survived everything. Community is very strong. Gazans support each other. They help each other. They take care of each other. And there's a very profound determination to continue on regardless of what happens to them. Now, this, as I said, happened this year. Can we have the next slide? This is a home demolition that I saw in 1993 when I was there. That's another thing that people don't realize, that the stuff that's been going on in the last couple of years that we've heard about is not new. It's always been going on, and it's been going on outside the news that comes to the United States. I never heard anything about this, not a word about it. So the basic idea here, the dilemma that the jackals in Israel are in right now, is the same as when you step on a landmine. And the United States developed these landmines in Vietnam where you'd walk along and you'd step on it, and stepping on it would charge it. And it worked with a spring, and you hear it go zzz, and you knew that the minute you lifted your foot, you were dead. So there you were with your foot on the landmine. You couldn't move or you were going to die. This is the position that Israel is in now with regard to Gaza. If they loosen up, if they allow Gaza, if they take their foot off the neck of the Palestinians, A number of those Palestinians are going to seek revenge, and it's not going to be a pretty situation. So they're trapped. They're trapped in their own strategy. So what we have then is the death, if you will, of the militaristic right-wing strategy of the United States, of Israel, of any country in the world that believes that security can be won through violence, that by keeping a people down, you can keep them from in any way harming you. And we know that there's this thing psychologically that we call the cycle of trauma. The cycle of trauma works like this. I am a population that is perceived by another population as a threat. That population, to protect it from me, my population, makes arrangements with the most brutal, pathological, psychopathic people among them to protect me from these people over here. That then traumatizes these people over here. And they become hypervigilant. They don't want this to happen again. They want to be protected from this group over here. So they appeal to the most psychopathic, mentally disordered people within their group, the jackals among the jackals, to protect them from that group. And who gets caught in the crossfire? The civilians. The civilians get caught in the crossfire all the time. And we call that the cycle of trauma. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, not only with regard to Israel, Palestine, but with regard to us, the United States. Because what happens is, when we get something like the Iraq War that we just finally disentangled ourselves from, and we have an experience like 9/11 with the World Trade Center coming down, and we have voices in the United States that say, we should find out why this is happening. Why do these people do this to us? And we have Dick Cheney saying, well, I guess they want us to give them therapy. Remember Dick Cheney? Yeah. The idea is that there are people who are trying to find out why this is happening. They want to talk to other people. They want to hear what their grievances are. These are the giraffes. The jackals are going to go in and they're going to fight. Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Pearl. ISIL is in that category now. So is Al-Qaeda, the Taliban to some degree. And all of these groups simply traumatize and traumatize and traumatize and traumatize. But in an age of terrorism, the idea that the jackals can control another population and remove the threat is over. It no longer exists. Maybe there was a time, for example, in the United States when we were afraid of the Native Americans, the First Nation people, and we had superior firepower, and we were able to do genocide, and we were able to keep them in their place, and we were able to remove them as any kind of a threat to anything we wanted to do in this country. But think about it now. Think about the United States military and how sophisticated it is with bombers and jets and nuclear weapons and aircraft carriers and troops and all of that. How effective were they against a pressure cooker at the Boston Marathon? Nada. Nothing. The scene has changed. We have entered an era now where you cannot purchase security by keeping another people down. So this, and we're seeing this in Gaza, is the death of the right-wing strategy. This is the death of that very anachronistic way of doing things. So, where do we go from here? Most of us who are here have seen before, stuff about Gaza. We've heard a lot about Gaza. The Corys are here. You can ask them. They know more than I do about Gaza. So the question we want to ask is not, okay, look at all the awful stuff going in Gaza, but where do we go from here? Go ahead, the next slide. 1991. These are kids going around Gaza. And this is how they got around. Donkey cart. This is 2014. Same thing. Poverty is rampant in Gaza. Next one. In 1991, this is how merchants got their goods around Gaza. Kind of wonder about these poor donkeys here. Next one. 2014. Same thing. So what's happening is we have a situation in Gaza that needs to be addressed, and that situation is that there is no future for the people in Gaza. They have no ability to travel. Physicians are not allowed to go to international conferences. They cannot get out of Gaza. They cannot go for further training overseas. They're stuck in Gaza. Everybody is stuck in Gaza. They have no place to put their efforts. And Gazans are very highly trained. The engineers in Gaza are very, very good. What do? They build tunnels into Israel. And they build highly sophisticated tunnels with ventilation and lights and concrete, and the Israelis can't find them. So if we want people not doing that, let's give them something else to do. So here are a couple of things that we could do. Number one would be to lift the siege. If Israel wants to have any hope for the future at all, because mind you, the landmine that they are stepping on gets more powerful every year. And when the reckoning comes due, it's going to get worse the longer we wait. So right off the bat, let's give Gazans a reason to improve relations with Israel. Let's foster cooperation. Let's establish and pursue mutual goals. This will have to be done by the giraffes. The jackals are not going to do it, for a reason that I will tell you in a few moments. Let's improve the standard of living in Gaza. Let's give Gazans a future, a place to put their energies other than in trying to survive what they have to survive from Israel. Let's give them a place to put their energies to improve their future. How will we do that? Let's allow building materials into Gaza. Now, one of the reasons the jackals don't want building materials to go into Gaza is that the Gazans build tunnels with those and they can't find them, and that's very frustrating to them, and then they have to come in and do all of this other stuff. Let's allow medicine in. Let's allow state-of-the-art medical supplies into Gaza. Just let them pour in. Let's give Gazans, let's give the hundreds of nurses who graduate every year in Gaza a place to work. Something to do with their lives, something to do that contributes to their culture. Let's allow physicians to travel. Now, this is one thing. All of these other things we're talking about, Israel is not likely to do. But they could do this. They could really easily do this. Physicians generally are not terrorists, Che Guevara notwithstanding. Che Guevara, of course, was a freedom fighter. But most physicians simply want to be able to travel to other countries to attend conferences, to share ideas, to learn new techniques, to show what they're doing. We could allow physicians out of Gaza through Israel into other countries with virtually no threat whatsoever to Israel. We could allow university professors to travel. Now, most university professors are not really very radical in terms of what they actually do. They may talk and they may teach and that kind of thing, but ultimately they're pretty much confined to the classroom. We can allow university professors to travel. We could invite children from Gaza to come into Israel to play sports, to participate in educational engagements. We could do what the movie Promises did. Any of you seen the movie Promises? Okay, Promises. Google it, get it. It was an Israeli-American man who was from Berkeley, decided to get together children from Israel and children from the West Bank and take the children from Israel into the West Bank to play with the Palestinian children. And what he had to do in talking to the Palestinian children to get them on board with this, because most of them didn't want anything to do with that, and the Israeli children, he finally found 2 kids who would do it. And it was just absolutely magnificent, but it's also kind of heartbreaking in the end. But this is what we need to be doing. Break the siege. Because there's a new movie out called Pride. The screenwriter, Stephen Beresford, has said in an interview, prejudice cannot survive proximity. It melts away when you meet and speak to those you fear. The jackals don't want that, though. They don't want people liking each other. That's why there's a siege on Gaza. Virtually everybody who goes to Gaza comes away loving the people of Gaza. Don't let them in. This isn't good. This isn't good for what we need to do. So the second thing we need to do, that Israel could do to really improve the situation, would be to apologize. To apologize for what they have done all these years to the Gazans. But that would necessitate admitting history. And history, the actual history of the creation of the State of Israel, is not allowed in Israel. It delegitimizes the state. That's the phrase that's used, and that's against the law. You can't delegitimize the state. Well, these are the kinds of statistics that are not allowed to be published. This is land ownership by district in Palestine just before 1948. Green is Palestinian or Arab, red is Jewish. You can see that the land was overwhelmingly owned by Palestinians. So when the United Nations, or when the United Nations decided we're going to create a state of Israel and we're going to give half to the Jews and half to the Arabs were like, "You're kidding me? Really? You're going to do that?" Now, there were two reasons why they didn't want to do that. One, they were going to have land taken away from them that belonged to them. But number two, Jews and Arabs lived together in Palestine pretty well before the creation of the state. And one of the very interesting statistics that you might want to look up is the number of Jews who left Israel, left Palestine, when the state of Israel was created. They did not want to live with the people coming in. They did not want to live with Zionists. They wanted to be where they were. I have a very good friend in Chicago. Her father is a Holocaust survivor, and her mother is an Israeli, actually a Palestinian, who said, the only solution to that situation is to put it back the way it was before the creation of the state. That's a Jewish woman, an Israeli, married to a Holocaust survivor, and these are the giraffes, and these are the people we're going to support. May I have the next slide? This is the population by district in Palestine immediately preceding 1948. Red is Palestinian, blue is Jewish. In only one district in all of Palestine were there more Jews than Palestinians. That was in the Jaffa district. All the others were primarily Arab, Palestinian. These statistics are not told in Israel. They are not published. The creation of the state of Israel, consequently, was accomplished through ethnic cleansing. Now, one of the interesting things is that there is a group in Israel of giraffes, and they are known as Zakrot, and they have wanted to distribute brochures. They're Israeli Jews who want to distribute brochures in the primary schools about what actually happened. Those books are banned. They are not allowed in the school. Also, in March of 2010, the Ministry of Education in Israel banned Israeli schools from distributing a booklet for children about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The critics had objected to parts of the declaration that referred to freedom of religion and protection of asylum seekers. So the first thing Israel could do would be to acknowledge its history. Say, okay, yeah, this is what happened. This is what we did. And yeah, they fought back, and there was a big problem, but yes, we did this, and we are sorry. And right off the bat, you're going to get 98% of the Palestinians saying, okay, we forgive you. Let's get back together and reconstitute our lives, that kind of a thing. What else could Israel do? Israel could be accountable. They could embrace accountability, and they could give up the phrase, we're looking into it. The phrase, we're looking into it, as Haaretz, the major newspaper in Israel, has pointed out, is the way the jackals in the Israeli government say, go away, we're not going to answer you. So in 1993, when I was working at the Gaza Community Mental Health Program, we were sitting around at the end of the day, sipping tea and kind of schmoozing about what we'd been doing and kind of theorizing about what we could do. We heard a noise outside the wall. And we went out, and an Israeli jeep had come around the corner, and 4 soldiers had jumped out with automatic weapons and had massacred all the children in the street. They simply mowed them down. Well, I'm an American, and you can't do this when there's an American around, so I went to the headquarters in Gaza City, and I said to the guy, I want to report this incident, and I want you to look into it, and I want some heads to roll here. He said, oh my God, you're right. He said, absolutely. What was the license number of the jeep? I said, these are military jeeps. They don't have any license numbers. You know that. There are no license plates. He said, oh, okay. So well, what were the names? What were the names? I said, they don't wear name tags. How do I know? He said, well, I don't know how we would ever look into that. I said, you don't know where your soldiers are? You don't know who was at that intersection at 5:10 yesterday? You don't know that? We're looking into it. I went back every day. We're looking into it. Well, 1993, as far as I'm concerned, was somewhere around 22 years ago, and as far as I know, they're still looking into it. Maddening. In 2002, Shaden Abu Hijah, who was a peace worker in the West Bank, she was part of the peace camp in the West Bank, was sitting on the second floor of her veranda in her house, and an Israeli jeep came around the corner and shot her dead. I asked Brian Baird, I asked Maria Cantwell, and I asked Patty Murray to find out what that was all about. We're looking into it. We're looking into it. They're still looking into it. No explanation has ever been given. Now, if you are the people who this is happening to, and you hear that, you get pretty angry. The landmine begins to get bigger. Yeah? 2003, Fadl Abu Hain. Fadl Abu Hain, a child psychologist in Gaza, friend of mine. He was arrested and imprisoned for terrorism in Israel. I asked Cantwell, Murray, and Board to look into it, to Baird, look into it. What's going on here? We're looking into it. We're looking into it. They're still looking into it. In 2014, 4 children were playing on the beach in Gaza. And this was during the war. Next one. And they were killed. They were killed by gunfire from an F-16. There was a reporter from France there who said there was no military target anywhere. This was not a military exercise. They were not killed, they were targeted. They were targeted and they were killed. Next. Next. There they are. Why? We're looking into it. And that will be looked into, and no answer will ever be forthcoming. Now, if there is accountability, sometimes you can find out that, well, okay, we were testing out some equipment and we screwed up. And clearly in Gaza, with a lot of the home demolitions that were out in various neighborhoods, they had screwed up. They were testing out new equipment. They didn't do it right. They blew up a home where it shouldn't have been blown up. There was no reason to blow that home up at all. And to admit that and say, yeah, we screwed up, we're really sorry. But no, never. What can Gaza do to help the situation? It's not just an Israeli jackal thing. There are jackals in Gaza too. So what can they do? Number one, they can begin to acknowledge their learned helplessness. One of the things that Gazans do a lot is they say that every problem that exists in Gaza is because of the Israelis. Well, you know, most of them are. No question about that. I mean, when you don't have electricity and you don't have water and you don't have sewage and you don't have medicine and you don't have books and you don't have food, yeah, you know, they're responsible for a lot. But it leads to a kind of helplessness that's passive aggression. So back in 1991, when Gaza was occupied by Israeli Defense Force, which it no longer is, but it was then, Gazans would not collect their garbage. They would just throw it in the streets, And they would say, well, it's up to Israel to collect this. We're not going to do it. And they would systematically compromise their health. They would systematically compromise their living environment out of a kind of passive-aggressive learned helplessness that we're going to get back at the Israelis. And a lot of Gazans will not in any way improve their situation as a way of sticking it to the jackals in Israel. This is not helpful. This is not going to work. Number two, when Julie and I had dinner, this is Juliet, my wife back here, who has been to Gaza 4 times, a Jewish woman who has been to Gaza 4 times and has many friends in Gaza, and the next time I go back, we're going to go together. I hope. You'll go with me, right? Okay, thank you. Drag a poor woman all over the place. We had dinner with a couple of Palestinian students that we brought over here, and the upshot of our conversation was that they always wanted Gaza to have a secular government. Now, these things aren't likely to happen very soon. This one might happen. Reduce the birth rate. The birth rate in Gaza is out of control. One of the things that we did when we were going around to various homes, talking to people who had lost children or sons or daughters or mothers or fathers or cousins or family members, one of the questions that our practitioners always asked was, how many children do you have? 11, 13. This is not helpful. And of course, the women who I was working with, who are educated and practitioners, they were like, I'm never having more than 2. You know, when I get married, I'm having 2 and that's it. I don't care what my husband says, it's going to be 2. You know, that kind of a thing. The birth rate isn't helping things in Gaza. It's making things more difficult. Of course, the problem there is that you have religious fundamentalists who believe that they should have as many children as possible so that they can also counterbalance the religious fundamentalists in Israel who are doing the same thing. One of the things that's really hard for the giraffes in Israel, who are mostly moderate, is their birth rate is far, far lower than the birth rate of the fundamentalist right-wing radicals. And so the fundamentalist right-wing radicals have a bigger say in the government over and over again. That's how people like Netanyahu get elected. The Gazans can promote and support volunteer work. They do a fair amount of this, but they could do more. You've got a lot of people in Gaza who are highly trained, who have no opportunity to practice because there are no jobs. Okay, there are no jobs. As long as there's no job and there's no economy, let them volunteer. Set up volunteer clinics. Use what money you have to do that, to improve the life of the people in Gaza. Now here's one that I think would work very well, actually. It's kind of along with allowing doctors to travel outside Gaza, which would be very easy for Israel to do. There's really no threat to Israel in that. Here's something Gaza could do that would be very interesting. Right now, we have in PhD and PsyD programs and Masters of Arts in Counseling programs in the United States a severe shortage of internships. People who have to get their hours for licensing can't do it because there's no place to do it. And if they do find a place, it usually doesn't pay. It would be quite easy for Gaza and quite useful for the practitioners of the world for Gaza to offer paid internships in psychology and medicine. When Julia and I lived in Chicago, Cook County Hospital was the plum place for residents to come in their residency. You saw more there than you saw in any of the other hospitals. You saw everything from gunshot wounds to tropical diseases. You got a wide exposure to all of the medical conditions. This would be the same for psychology and medicine in Gaza. Advertise paid internships. Advertise paid internships, and what would the jackals in Israel do? Would they be able to say, no, you can't go there? Would they be able to do, as they did in 2007, to the 7 people in Gaza who won Fulbright fellowships, you can't leave, we're not going to let you go? Would they? They took so much crap for that, they finally let them go. This is a way of the giraffes of the world to begin to put pressure on the jackals and say, hey, you know, this is not the way we want to do things. And finally, I think we all agree on this one, most of us in Gaza at any rate, stop firing the rockets. The problem with the rockets is they are basically 4th of July display type things. You can see them on the internet. They're on YouTube, and you can see them at night. And they go up, and then they flame out. And they just sort of fall back to earth. They don't have warheads. They don't explode when they hit. If you're standing underneath one, when it hits you on the head, it's going to do you in. You're not going to survive that one. But as the experts say, if you're 10 feet away from it, you're fine. Don't even worry about it. You're not going to be affected by it at all. They have the only effect that the rockets really have is they give a certain sense to the Palestinians in Gaza of at least we're fighting back. At least we're not allowing all of this stuff just to happen to us. You sniper, drone car, kill a little kid who wanders into this no man's land area, we're going to fire a rocket at you. At least there's that feeling, but it's not working. It's not doing what it needs to do. What can the U.S. do? Let's say, put it at the government level. Number 1, go to Gaza. Members of Congress, the State Department, should go to Gaza. The State Department does not go to Gaza at all. No American diplomats go to Gaza. They will go to the West Bank. And 2 weeks ago, they went to the West Bank to explore a situation where settlers had been murdering farmers who wanted to farm their land. Because if land is left vacant for 10 years, it can then be confiscated by the state. So if you can keep the farmers from farming it, then you can confiscate it after 10 years. They were not allowing them to farm. I think it was 7 diplomats or 4 diplomats from the State Department went into Gaza. They were stoned by the settlers and had to leave because their lives were in danger. It's no more dangerous in Gaza, let me tell you. It's a lot less dangerous than that in Gaza. If our diplomats went there, they would be very warmly received. Number 2, the United States could rebuild Gaza, and this will never happen. But if you imagine the amount of money we spend every year on defense, and took half of it and built hospitals and schools and brought and housing for people, we would be a lot safer than the aircraft carriers that were of no use against the pressure cooker at the Boston Marathon. It would be a much wiser way to defend ourselves by making friends with people in other countries, and Gaza particularly. Financial aid to Israel. Well, here you go, folks. This is all about AIPAC and what we do. We give $3.5 billion at least every year to Israel. $3.5 billion. Now, that actually would work out to $10 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. Every one of us. 350 million people. However, in Thurston County, you know what it comes to? Very interesting. Of our federal tax dollars, we send $2 million to Israel every year. $2 million. Now, 2 years ago, we had to cut our Thurston County budget by $6 million. We could use that $2 million here. And the least that our country could do, the least our government could do, would be to say, okay, if you want this money, it's tied to human rights, just the way it is in every other country in the world, except Israel. We're going to enforce restrictions on torture, war crimes, ethnic cleansing. You do that, you don't get the money, just the way we do with every other country, except Israel. We refuse to sell arms used against Palestinian civilians. Now here's where the rubber meets the road, because of that $3.5 billion that goes from the United States to Israel every year, what do you think Israel does with it? They buy weapons from the United States. 90% of it comes right back here to the defense industries, United Technologies, Lockheed Martin. So it's a huge government subsidy to the arms industry, paid for and financed by you and me while our roads deteriorate. This is a problem. We need to make our government understand that we don't like this. Finally, make aid contingent on allowing Americans to travel to Gaza. How hard is that? If John Van Eenwyk wants to go to Gaza and you don't let him in, you don't get any money. You know, we're going to pay your money. If he has to pay you all of this money every year, you let him in. Because he's no threat to you other than the fact that he's going to give speeches like this in Olympia, where everybody's already heard it, and you know about Olympia anyway, and they're not big a threat to you in Israel, so it's not that big a deal. And finally, the United States could join the International Criminal Court. We don't belong to the International Criminal Court, and we won't join, because we don't want somebody else deciding things for us. We'll take care of it ourselves. We're looking into it. What can we in this room do? Okay, here's where we can really get going. We can form internet relationships with Gazans. The internet is wonderful. We have all kinds of social media where we can go and connect with people in Gaza and talk to them, and they can talk to us. We may not be able to go there, but we can at least connect with them, let them know what our lives are like, let us know what their lives are like. Because, again, as we've heard before, prejudice cannot survive proximity. So let's create some proximity here. Number two, we could patronize Palestinian businesses. Well, we can't really go to the West Bank and Gaza and do that. But guess what? Tradition sells them right here. You can go out to a shelf over here and there's beautiful pottery from the West Bank. There's olive oil. We can buy things and support the economy to the degree that it exists in Gaza and the West Bank. We can press our elected officials to visit Gaza. The next time you're talking to Denny Heck, next time you have a chance, for some, they say, Denny, you been to Gaza? How come? Why didn't you go, Denny? Wait, did you go to Israel? Or Cantwell, or Murray, did you go to Gaza? No, you didn't. Why not? Okay. Just keep the pressure on. We can also begin to spread the word about the right-wing ideology, the whole right-wing ideology of obtaining security through force, which so many of our fellow Americans in this country believe is a valid way to do things. We can, as Marshall Rosenberg said, be the giraffes, and we can go up against the jackals. We can support the giraffes. We can support the voices of moderation in Israel and in Gaza. We can support the Gaza Community Mental Health Program. Hey guys, I hope you're seeing this on YouTube. We all love you. Support them. They are a wonderful group of people who are doing wonderful things and are very reasonable in their approach to politics, to religion, to psychology. Now, one of the interesting things, finally, and I'm just going to finish this up, is that it is a fundamental psychological principle, a fundamental psychoanalytic principle, that consciousness, which is our ability to understand, to make sense of, to think through, to come up with rational ways of dealing with things. Consciousness is raised only through conflict. If there's no conflict, there's no consciousness. So when you think of it, if everything is just the way it is, and it's just going along the way everybody expects it, nobody questions it. Nobody even notices it. But as soon as something doesn't fit, we begin to wonder about it. We begin to talk about it. Now, the right-wing ideology is do not engage the other side. And what that means is no consciousness raising, no ability of one side to understand the other side, no ability of us to become more highly functioning individuals. Only through engaging the other side of a conflict can we begin to become more sophisticated in what we do, more nuanced. We used to have a form of that in our country. Remember? It was called the equal time provision. Remember the equal time provision for the FCC? If a newspaper or a radio or a television, back in those days, wanted to put forth an opinion, they had to give equal time to the opposing points of view. Ronald Reagan ended that. He got rid of that. And that's why we now have media that doesn't even have to begin to look at the other side of issues. Polarization in our own country is as bad as it is in anywhere else in the world. And what we have to do is we have to change that. We have to absolutely demand that we hear the other point of view, not only in the media, but in our own lives with other people, so that we begin to engage people who don't agree with us, so we can begin to understand what their perspective is. They can begin to understand what our perspective is, and together we can come up with a third way that none of us thought about. So finally, we have a lot of people in Israel who are really working with us on this issue and trying to do something about what's going on there. Since 1970, there has been incident after incident after incident of Israeli soldiers refusing to serve in the Palestinian territories because of what they're being asked to do. And in 1989, the testimony of a soldier named Yakyam Yogev during the Kibbutz Artsy movement interview. Kibbutz Artsy was a movement of 80 kibbutzes that were challenging the Israeli policy in the occupied territories. And they had an interview with General Amram Mitznah. And in 1989, this is what Yakyam Yogev said. I don't think I can go in at 2 in the morning to an apartment with 10 small crying children and take somebody away. This is not work I can live with. This is not why I enlisted. This is not what the Army trained me for. I am not supposed to do such things. For me, there are terrible historical resonances when we are kicking a door and the people inside are shouting, "Who's there?" and we say, "Open the door." Historical references, we know exactly what they're talking about there. We're not made for this, not physically, not psychologically. Today I had to club a child no older than my own. I'm just not made for this. Maybe it means I won't accomplish my mission, but I don't want my soldiers to shoot plastic bullets. Plastic bullets kill. There are many Palestinians who've been killed by plastic bullets, but what he said earlier was, because we're told, oh, they're just plastic, just fire them at will, we don't realize what we're doing. And then he goes on. Some say the problem is that our orders are unclear. I say that our orders are entirely clear, but that it's impossible to carry them out. Are you aware of what happens to prisoners? He asked the general. There is a commander in Gaza, this is 1970, to whom I won't take any more people because I'm not prepared to accept what this officer does. He makes them climb up onto a military personnel carrier with their hands and feet tied. How are they supposed to get up there? How? God knows. So I don't take prisoners to him anymore. He can do whatever he likes to me. These are our people. These are our people. These are the Israelis who we love. These are the Israelis who we want to work with. These are the giraffes of Israel who we want to support to the nth of our abilities, not the jackals who our government supports unilaterally, and when they appear in the U.S. Congress, give them standing ovations several times during their speeches. This is absolutely wrong, absolutely unacceptable. And so the last thing that I will say to you, and I've covered a lot of ground here tonight, I really appreciate your listening to it. Go to the next slide. Stephen Beresford, the screenwriter of Pride, prejudice cannot survive proximity. It melts away when you meet and speak to those you fear. That is a truth, and that is pragmatic, and that works. And that's what we all need to demand, not only of our government, but of each other. Here are some organizations, if you're interested in joining a little more collectively on this. The first one is J Street. J Street is an organization that proposes and supports the two-state solution and supports candidates in the United States who are in favor of that. J Street is trying to become a force that can counterbalance AIPAC, and you can read all about AIPAC in these things here. Okay, they're yours for the taking. Churches for Middle East Peace, CMEP.org, very good organization. A number of weeks ago I gave a presentation at St. Benedict's in which I talked about the religious aspect of all of this stuff. We didn't record it, but well, you probably know what I said anyway. Also, I talked about what the war in Gaza and what the situation in Gaza is doing to the children in terms of the social fabric and helping them to decide whether or not they want to be part of any kind of a group communal effort with regard to their neighbors. That is actually on YouTube, thanks to Dennis. That was given at the Rachel Corrie Foundation. Thank you very much, Craig and Cindy. And that's available. You can see that analysis of the psychology of the children. Jewish Voice for Peace is a fabulous organization. You don't have to be Jewish to join. They welcome anybody. And they are vehemently giraffe. And they are vehemently supporting giraffes. End the Occupation, www.endtheoccupation.org. Very interesting group to get information from. Also, you can join them. And then, of course, all of our favorite one, the Rachel Corrie Foundation. You can join the Rachel Corrie Foundation. You can give them money. They do marvelous, wonderful, extremely fascinating, fabulous work. What would we know about Gaza if we didn't have the Rachel Corrie Foundation? Next slide. And of course, there's us, ITTP. These things cost money. You go to Gaza, you got to pay a lot of money. You got to get there, you got to get through Israel, you got to stay in hotels, and sometimes you got to go to the border, and it costs a lot of money, and sometimes you get there and they say, sorry, you're not going to get in, and you just lost all your airfare. So we need the money too. There is a donation basket in back, sitting right in front of Juliet Eenwyk there, so you can actually engage her. That'll be a wonderful experience for you while you put money into the basket. On your tables, you have brochures. You can email us. You can get in touch with us. You can send us all your nickels and dimes. We'd love that too. But thank you all very much for being here, and on behalf of the people of Gaza, and especially on behalf of the people of Gaza Community Mental Health Program, I would like you just to give a round of applause so they all know that you were here and you were with them at least tonight. Thank you.